On July 27th, 2003, the movie named Seabiscuit is officially released, grossing over $20 million in its first weekend, going on to make over almost $150 million worldwide, which was nominated for 7 Academy Awards about a scrappy horse that fought through adversity along with his jockey to become one of the greatest horses of all time. And here's the story today behind Seabiscuit, the horse, who was good enough to have a movie made after him almost 70 years after he was born. Today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, how much did Charles Howard pay for the rights for Seabiscuit? Now, if you listen to our Secretariat episode, which also is a horse who had a movie made after him, after the success of the movie Seabiscuit, you know that lineage for these horses is huge. And it was the same for Seabiscuit, who was the grandson of arguably one of the greatest horses of all time, Man of War. And this lineage tracking determines how much a horse will cost when they're born, how much a horse will cost throughout their lifetime. And it usually determines the success they might have as a racehorse as well. And Seabiscuit was known as a West Coast horse, although he was born in Lexington, Kentucky in 1933. Grew up as a colt at the Caliborn Farms in Kentucky. He was undersized, had wobbly knees, and would often overeat. He wasn't the ideal racehorse. And as they continued to train him, he even looked lazy. And his trainers were more focused on another horse they had named Omaha, who would go on to win the 1935 Triple Crown. So because of this, Seabiscuit was put into smaller races that you see at local racetracks because he didn't get the focus and they didn't see any promise in him. And he failed to win any of his first 17 races and usually finished in the back of the field. But every now and then, he would do something surprising. He would go on to set 2 records at different racetracks in the Northeast, which caught the attention of some other owners. And by his age 2 season, which is normally when racehorses begin their real push for the Triple Crown, he had raced 35 times and only won 5 of them, finishing in second 7 times. And he was offered to be sold for $2,500 at the time, which is a little over $50,000 today, which was actually a pretty good price for a horse back in the day. But nobody wanted to take a chance on Seabiscuit. But after he set those records in the Northeast, he caught the eye of Tom Smith, who was a trainer, and told his employer, Charles Howard, who was an automobile entrepreneur, about him, and they actually purchased him for $8,000, which is almost $200,000 today, which sounds like a lot for what he was going before, but he would more than make up for this investment. As with a new trainer who really gave him focus and adapted his training to Seabiscuit rather than trying to put Seabiscuit into the average training, it helped blossom Seabiscuit into new heights. And the first race that Seabiscuit ran for his new owner was on August 22nd, 1936. And that's where he also got paired up with Red Pollard, who was a Canadian jockey who just loved horses, but his size was unorthodox for a jockey, as he stood 5'7", and the ideal height for a jockey is closer to 5 feet flat. But Red and Seabiscuit had a bond, and they quickly grew with their connection with each other and won multiple races that first year. And then they went from the East Coast to the West, where Seabiscuit really made a name for himself. Where in 1937, he won California's most prestigious race at Santa Anita, winning a purse worth over $125,000, which today would be well over $3 million. But this was important because this is when they really realized what Seabiscuit had, as Seabiscuit was not an average horse that liked to take the lead and run away with it. He needed something to push him. He needed something to chase, and that's when he was at his best. That's when he really took off in 1937, where he won 11 of his 15 races and was the leading money winner that year, winning over $400,000. Pretty good investment for that $8,000 they bought him for. Although he was not named the Horse of the Year, that went to War Admiral, who won the Triple Crown that season. as Seabiscuit mainly focused on races on the West Coast. And this set up a great opportunity. And horse racing fans wanted to see the East versus the West, Seabiscuit versus War Admiral, to see who was really the greatest horse that year. And interestingly enough, War Admiral was actually related to Seabiscuit, as War Admiral's father was Man of War, and Seabiscuit's grandfather was Man of War as well. So War Admiral was technically Seabiscuit's uncle. And Seabiscuit's team tried to do whatever they could to set up a match race with War Admiral, as they wanted to be named the best horse in America. But they had already won the Triple Crown. They didn't need to prove anything. Those were the biggest races. Although Seabiscuit's team continued to try to negotiate a possible match, and they would even let War Admiral set the rules. But to try to battle this, they entered Seabiscuit in every race that War Admiral was going to race. And every time, War Admiral would be a scratch from that race. And they would continue to do this until they could face off against War Admiral to show who was the better horse. Until Seabiscuit's team said, you guys get to decide the distance, the setup, everything, the location. You guys pick every single thing. So they could not dispute the outcome. And then on November 1st, 1938, Seabiscuit and War Admiral were finally set to face off against them in the matchup of the century. The event was going to be a 1 3/16 mile at the Pimlico Racecourse in Maryland. And it would be a non-gate start with over 40,000 people in attendance and 40 million listening on the radio. And War Admiral came in as a favorite, 1-4 by the odds makers. And this is where, and given all the provisions, is how they trained Seabiscuit to head into this matchup of the century, as Seabiscuit was a guy that had to come from behind. But War Admiral was a guy that strengthened throughout the race. And they didn't want War Admiral to get too far ahead, so Seabiscuit would stay back and just give up. So they trained him with a bell so they could have him start fast right away, instead of his normal catch up from behind. But there was also another issue for Seabiscuit, as Red Pollard, his jockey that he had a great connection with, got injured training another horse and could not participate in this race. So fellow jockey George Wolfe took over one of the biggest horse races of all time. And when the bell finally rang in this matchup of the century, Seabiscuit broke in front and took the lead by a length after 20 seconds. And halfway down the backstretch, War Admiral started to cut into that lead, gradually pulling neck and neck with Seabiscuit. And when they came around that last turn, Seabiscuit was a nose ahead and slowly stretched out his lead little by little, finishing with a 4-length win over War Admiral. And that's despite War Admiral running his best time at that distance. As a result of this, Seabiscuit would be named American Horse of the Year for 1938 and became one of the most famous figures in America at the time. Everyone loved him because he wasn't just this guy that had a perfect record. In fact, he ended his career with a 33-15-1 record. But he would still be inducted into the Horse Racing Hall of Fame and have a statue of himself at St. Anita Park. Unfortunately, after this, he would suffer a fall in the 1939 year, which caused him to miss basically the entire year. But on February 9th, 1940, he would race again, winning his final race. And on April 10th that same year, they would officially announce his retirement from racing. And at the time, he was the all-time leading money winner in the history of horse racing. And he would be put out to stud, where he sired over 100 fowls. But unfortunately, he would suffer a heart attack in 1947 and pass away. But his legacy lives on as he embodied the American spirit. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the fastest. He was a fighter. And that's what everyone claimed on to. You wanted him to win. He was the true underdog story. And that's why his movie, Seabiscuit, is one of the best horse movies ever made. And people latch on to that because it is a true underdog story. And I hope you enjoyed this true underdog story. It's a great one for all of us to learn from and be motivated that even if we get down, we can always right ourselves and come back and win as well. And I want to encourage you guys to spread the word about daily sports history, however you would like to. If you want to send a text, if you want to send something out on social media, any way you want to, it'd be eternally grateful by me. The more we grow, the more I can do for you. I want to get back to 7 days a week, maybe even start doing some more exclusive videos on YouTube. I have great plans for the show, but we also need more people to listen, and that's where you come in. because word of mouth is the greatest way for us to grow. But don't forget to come back tomorrow for more daily sports history. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question? How much did Charles Howard pay for Seabiscuit? And the answer was $8,000, which is almost $200,000 today.